Alright, this is an update for the many questions I have received about converting this Miller Bluestar 1E. Right here is an adapter plate, and it adapts the original bell housing, which you can see here I have cut an access by removing the fins. It adapts this original bell housing to the back of this Predator engine. This Predator engine being a 13 horsepower and of course a Chinese motor, but the big thing is it's a 13 horsepower motor, 420 cc's, so it has a smaller mounting pattern in the back than what came with the original big cast iron 16 horsepower Kohler motor. So this bell housing has a larger diameter bolt pattern than what's on the back of this motor, so I had to adapt using this plate. In retrospect, this is what I had, but I would probably have used 3/8 plate. If I do it again, I would probably buy a piece of 3/8 plate to make this adapter plate here. Internally, as you can see, the rotating stator has a fan on it. It is mounted to a plate here via 4 bolts. This plate on the original engine internally is cut, has a taper cut into it, because the PTO shaft, output shaft on the original Kohler or Tecumseh engine was just a small stub, and it had a taper cut into it with a key, and this plate was attached to that with a center bolt. Now, on your replacement engine, it's a straight shaft, and most of them are in the neighborhood of like 3 inches long. Much too long for this application. And being a straight shaft, obviously that taper doesn't work for you. So I had to go and use internally, you can't see it, but there's a QR split tapered bushing in there. The inner bore of that bushing fits the diameter of my output shaft, my PTO shaft. The outer diameter, it fits into a new taper cut into that plate right here. I had a machine shop cut the taper to fit that split bushing and drill a couple of holes, because as you bolt that bushing into that plate, it draws it in, and the taper causes it to close the inner diameter around your PTO shaft. Now I had to fit it loosely, and the whole reason behind this cutout here was so that I could reach in there with a long wrench and tighten the bolts down after I had mated this bell housing, which was already attached to the back of the engine block, to the generator housing here, 4 points. When those bolts were bolted, then I was able to reach in here with the wrench and begin to tighten up the bolts on the split bushing. And of course I would give a couple of turns and rotate the motor, and give a couple of turns and rotate the motor, so that I had it centered on that shaft. It's actually pretty straightforward when you think about it. There are a few things I would do differently if I did it again, but this was rather hastily put together. I didn't have to make this adapter plate when I used the Briggs & Stratton 16 horsepower V-twin, because the back of its engine plate, where the PTO shaft is, already had the proper bell housing mounting pattern for this original bell. It's why I state that if you bought a 16 horsepower engine or above, that it would most likely have the proper bell housing mounting bolts pattern, so you wouldn't need this adapter plate. This bell housing would bolt directly to the back of your engine block, and then it would just be a matter of you having to get in here with, you know, the taper split bushing and cutting off the proper length, because your shaft is going to be too long. You know, the inside of this fan is not hollow. There's a little bit of hollow in there, but it doesn't have much. It wasn't meant for a long straight shaft, so you have to cut the excess shaft off. You have to take the measurements prior to mating this whole assembly up. I don't know if that clears anything up for you. Hope it does. Have a good one.